Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our last session, which is integrating environmental sustainability measures for cultural sites. Today presenting is Angela Moore, who's with the Missouri Historical Society. Angela, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself through with your own title. And explain that. Angela, it's great to have you here, and go ahead.
All right, thank you so much, Chris. My name is Angela Moore. I am the Sustainability Coordinator at the Missouri Historical Society. I oversee all of the sustainability initiatives here, and I am now overseeing all of sustainability infrastructure. So green infrastructure is starting to be a major thing in St. Louis, and so I'll be overseeing all of our electric vehicle installation and all the green infrastructure of solar panels. So that's a little portion of the job that I do. But today I wanted to talk a little bit about environmental sustainability and how an organization can integrate it into their program. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. I'm going to pull up my presentation here. And then I do want to encourage, if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. You can raise your hand and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions once we get started. And then I'll also have my contact information if you would like to contact me afterwards. Okay, so hopefully you're able to see my presentation there. Okay, so a little background on my organization. I'm pretty sure that a lot of you are familiar with the Missouri Historical Society, but I wanted to share a little bit about the historical aspect of the Missouri Historical Society. It is comprised of 2 museums and also a library and research center. But all of these buildings are LEED certified buildings. And 2 of the buildings, one of the buildings is a zero waste certified building, which is Soldiers Memorial. And the library and research center is now going through a 3-year process to become a true zero waste certified project. And so the Missouri Historical Society began to implement environmental sustainability practices in 2012. And this was all staff-led efforts. In 2017, I was brought on to the Missouri Historical Society to start to put data towards those environmental efforts. And so those were some of the first things that I did when I got to the Missouri Historical Society is I started to collect data and to also write case studies about environmental sustainability within museums and cultural sites. And as I started to write more and more case studies, I started to advocate for other museums to be more environmentally responsible as the Missouri Historical Society. So our sustainability program, 70% of the work that I do is based off of green building certification. So those green building certifications are the LEED certification, and LEED is the acronym for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And now we're working on the zero waste certification for the Library and Research Center. 25% of my job is environmental sustainability initiatives such as green infrastructure, capital projects. All of our capital projects from this point on have a green element to it. So I work on capital projects for the Missouri Historical Society. And then 5% of the work that I do is staff engagement. I know that sounds kind of funny because most people feel that environmental efforts come mostly from staff, which is true. But one thing that I want to mention is the reason why that we as an organization focus more on buildings is because of statistic that was just released. And that statistic came from the UN Environmental Committee. And that UN statistic highlighted that 40% of the global greenhouse gases come from building operations. So that means that our buildings that we operate as cultural sites contribute to 40% of all of global greenhouse gases. That's more than the transportation industry. And so that's why the Missouri Historical Society has focused more on greening of the building itself as opposed to staff-led activities. So cultural sectors, I mean, as we have seen in the current state of cultural sectors, COVID-19 has pretty much widened our worldview within the cultural sector. Prior to the pandemic, we maybe was state-centric, and we just looked at efforts, cultural sector efforts within our state. But COVID-19 has changed that a lot. With that, our worldview has altered. We experience the world from a different standpoint. We had the opportunity to stop and really take note of how vulnerable we were and still are as humans. But more importantly, our views altered for the better. We began to really understand that we are connected, and we're very much connected and dependent on each other and nature. So what does this have to do with environmental sustainability? Well, in order for us to look at the current trends of environmental sustainability, we have to look at the past for a path forward. When we look into the past, it provides us with a greater view of how we thought of the environment, how we think of the environment currently, and how we really should think of the environment. And so in the past, we had an egocentric view of the environment. That means that is self. We are over all of nature, humankind, mankind. And so humans were ruling, and we saw that from this standpoint, from an environmental standpoint, we were doing more harm than good. And then when we went on to Earth Day, we moved to more of like an eco system of viewing sustainability. And that system was we were all interconnected. But now the current trend in environmental sustainability is this term SIVA. And that term is being in service. So we are interconnected with nature. We are in service to nature, and nature is in service to us. So that's a reciprocal relationship. And this is the mindset that we want to have within cultural institutions. As cultural institutions, we usually are always in service, whether it's to our community, whether it's to our employees, but we also need to be in service to the environment, and the environment needs to be in service to us. And so we need to start moving away from that ego view of we're all connected, because we know we're all connected. COVID showed us that, to moving towards this mindset of SIVA, where we have a reciprocal approach. And so I'm going to move into some of the practices that we can implement in environmental sustainability. And I'm going to talk about 3 areas. And then I'm going to talk about how you can put those 3 areas into practice within your organization. And so those 3 areas is environmental sustainability in the earth, environmental sustainability and social issues, and environmental sustainability and economic growth. And so many people believe that is what we call the triple bottom line. So when we talk about environmental sustainability and the planet, we have always talked about that when we look at it in the environmental world. The planet has always been the forefront, but as we have come to understand that it is just not about saving the planet anymore. It is a more deeper issue than just saving the planet. And as cultural institutions, we need to talk a little bit more about just saving the planet, because if we want to enact change, we have to talk about another issue instead of just saving the planet. We need to talk about the social issues that surround environmental sustainability. And so when you look at environmental sustainability and social issues, COVID-19 really showed us that those who were in lower socioeconomic areas of Black and Brown communities who had a lot of environmental issues within their region, they were impacted greatly by COVID-19. And so environmental sustainability definitely does have a social issue aspect to it. And so as cultural institutions, we're not just only looking out for saving the planet or doing what's right from a planetary standpoint, but from an environmental sustainability standpoint for social issues, we're doing what's right for those within our community and those who occupy our spaces daily, so staff. So when you look at environmental sustainability, it's just not about patrons that come into the museum or the cultural site, but it's also very much about staff coming into a healthy building every day. And so that's one thing we have to talk about. Another area of environmental sustainability is economic growth. One of the things that a lot of people do not like to talk about sometimes within the cultural field is money. How are we going to have money to sustain our institutions? But when we talk about economic growth from a sustainability standpoint, you are actually showing your institution how to save money. And so a lot of things that I talk about for environmental sustainability to our board and our leadership team who sign off on capital projects that are supposed to be green is I talk about return on investment. So if we invest in more environmental sustainability practices, that means our return on investment will allow us to put money in other practices other than just the building being operated. But we're putting it into practices such as conservation, education around artifacts, and not just keeping the lights on within our building. So how can you put all of this into practice within your cultural site? Each cultural site will be different, and not all cultural sites will be able to do a LEED certification or a true zero waste certification, and that's okay. But one thing that all sites can do is build a culture of awareness. Build a culture of awareness around environmental sustainability and why it's important within your institution. Even if you just talk about the social impact of implementing one sustainability practice, then you are actually building a culture of awareness. So that culture of awareness comes from webinars. Reach out to various organizations within your community and see if they can come into your facility to do webinars. Something simple you can do is creating a simple newsletter of some environmental practice that you would like to see happen at the museum and implement it. You can create signage that shows staff how to recycle properly. You can host lunch and learns or collaborate with other organizations. Another way is to put this in practice outside of initiatives. And what does this mean? Usually most environmental programs, they usually go to a board or a leadership committee and they talk about environmental initiatives and how much money they're going to pour into the environmental initiatives. But there is something that staff can very much do that they do not have to go to their board for, they do not have to go to their leadership team for. And one of those things is build a small green committee within your department. You can join a advisory committee that works on green buildings. You can practice free take-back programs. If you've ever heard of take-back programs, they're for items that a cultural institution buy often. And so figure out what vendors will take those products back and recycle them for you. And so a lot of these practices outside initiatives can happen at the departmental level. You can hold a small office swap with your office partner if you have an office partner, or within your department. Another small thing you can do is try to go paperless for one function within your office. Just try it for a week and see how you'll like it. Another thing, turn off computers, turn off lights. That's a simple thing that anyone can do within a cultural institution. You can bring products into the office that are recyclable. And you can make sure that if you are a purchaser within your organization, that you are purchasing items that can be recycled, reused, repurposed for another means. And so the list of things that a cultural institution can do, it goes on and on. And one thing that I do want to say is that each cultural institution's sustainability initiative will be different than the next. And so although we lead heavily on green building certifications, other cultural institutions lead heavily on community activities that encourage sustainability in their home. Some organizations lead heavily on becoming stakeholders within the community to change sustainability practices within their city. So just know that when you put it into practice, it does not have to be perfect, but it just has to be put into practice so that you know what will work for your organization and what will not. So I did talk a lot about green building certifications, and I'm going to show why they're quite effective. Even if your organization is not going for a LEED certification, if you look at all of the categories that an organization has to implement to become a LEED building, they're all areas that have the greatest impact on environmental change. So water efficiency, education and awareness, energy, waste reduction, air quality, which is very important in cultural institutions, is air quality, which I have a whole nother webinar and presentation on air quality within cultural sites, and innovation and operation. So even if your organization cannot go for a LEED certification because maybe you do not have a LEED certified professional on staff, at least try to pick one of those categories to implement at your organization. When I first started, my organization was nowhere close to being able to reach a LEED certified building. So I picked one thing that I will focus on to slowly step us toward LEED certification. And the one thing that I picked was energy efficiency. And I did an activity called benchmarking. So I used the Energy Star Portfolio Manager, which is a free EPA tool, and I began to benchmark. I began to benchmark how much energy we were using, how much water we were using, and how much waste we were using. And then I started to put money signs to it. And I said, hey, if we start to become a little more energy efficient, this is how much money we can save in a year. And so just by doing that practice, I was able to gain a little more money to implement sustainability practices. And so don't be discouraged if you can't go for a green building certification. You can start off like we did, start off in baby steps and lead your way to the green building certifications. And another reason why we lean towards those a lot is because they have scientific backing and they're very much data driven. Another operation that we do at the Missouri Historical Society that I want to talk about is TRUE. It's a zero waste certification. From my study of the Missouri Historical Society over the last 5 years, we're pretty waste intensive as cultural sites. We preserve artifacts, we take in artifacts, we show artifacts, but not only that, there's a lot of behind the scene operations that waste is produced. And as cultural sites, we have some pretty unique waste that would not go into a municipal recycling can. And so that's one of the areas that I have been exploring a lot more, is how to create zero waste environments for cultural institutions. And the Missouri Historical Society have one, and I'm working on a second one for the Library and Research Center. And so start to look at some of those practices of zero waste and energy efficient. And I would like to say this, a lot of these practices are free. So if you reach out to your local USGBC chapter, they will help you to benchmark your building for free. They will find energy efficient ways for you to green your building and work with your facilities team for free. So all of these things are actually free avenues for you to take to help to green your institution. So what if you're not even there? So you say, I'm not even there. I'm not even there about talking to my facilities team. I'm not there about reaching out or benchmarking. Then your next step is collaboration. Find your counterpart at another cultural institution in your state or even out of state. I found my counterpart at our local zoo. I found my counterpart at our local botanical gardens, but it went even further. I found my counterpart within other museums. And I started to talk to them on how can we collaborate for me to make some changes within my organization. And so if you feel overwhelmed by just implementing a few sustainability practices, I guarantee if you collaborate with any of your local organizations on green measures, you will greatly benefit. Another benefit of collaboration is you get to barter. I barter a lot. My budget is not a large budget. And so I barter quite a bit. So if I do a presentation for the Missouri Botanical Gardens, they will trade me 2 presentations for staff to come and do a staff-led presentation on sustainability for my staff. And so I barter quite a bit with the other organizations, and we kind of exchange a lot of information of what our institutions are doing in the area of sustainability. And I do have to note, there are 2 institutions listed here. They do not have a sustainability person that they staff, but they come together and try to collaborate with me so that they can implement a few things here and there within their institution, although they do not have a dedicated staff member. So what can we look forward to within cultural institutions if we are to implement some small environmental practices? One of the futures that I envision for cultural institutions going forward is for institutions to take a greater responsibility of our environmental impact while collecting, educating, and researching. Within my 5 years of studying environmental effects on cultural institutions, I have learned that they are energy intensive, they're water intensive, and they're waste intensive. And so we have an obligation to our communities and our staff to integrate a few, if not more, environmental sustainability measures. And I want to close out by saying that you are always, anyone on is always welcome to reach out to me at any time if you have questions on small or large environmental sustainability programs that you would like to implement at your organization. And my contact information is below. And if I cannot answer that for you, I promise you that I will link you up with someone who definitely can help you. And so I guess I'll turn it over to any questions or comments that you may have at this time.
Thank you, Angela. So if you have a question, put them in the Q&A or in the chat, or as Angela said, you can email her. Want something a little bit more in depth.
And I know it's a lot. It's a lot to think about.
So Angela, and so I'm at the Library and Research Center where you're about to really dig deep on this zero waste. So can you give us just like a couple of first steps on what that looks like?
Yeah, so the first step, as Chris mentioned, the zero waste certification is a pretty lengthy one. It is not what it sounds like. A lot of people think of zero waste as an organization not producing any waste whatsoever. That's not what it's saying. It is saying that you are going to divert or reuse, repurpose 90% of the materials that you bring onto site. So in doing that effort, one of the first steps that I did for the Library and Research Center is I started to gather industry-specific waste for the Library and Research Center. So this is waste that we usually just put into the landfill because we didn't know how to recycle it. And so I gave a little industry bin to each department, and they were going to put all the waste that they did not know what to do with in this little bin. And then over the next 2 to 3 years, I will find vendors to recycle or reuse that waste, or I'll work with that department to find a more environmentally friendly option. And so that is the first process of zero waste. And the reason why we do it for the Missouri Historical Society is actually a social issue for us at the Missouri Historical Society. Recently, there was an environmental racism report that was released in St. Louis, and hazardous waste was mentioned in that report. And it mentioned that most large industries in St. Louis do not know that some of their waste winds up in lower social economic brown and Black communities in St. Louis. And so that's one of the reasons why we as an organization is starting to look towards more zero waste efforts, because it is a social issue for us, and we do not want to contribute to the environmental racism anymore. So that's why we're going for zero waste for the majority of our institutions. So that's kind of the tip of the iceberg of that certification. It's a really long one. So
yeah, I just to throw in a couple of things, a couple of things that we do. One is museum specific, our gloves. So we collect our gloves in one place. And another thing, and anyone could do this, obviously, is batteries. So we have a battery bin that anybody wants to bring their batteries in, or batteries that you use on site, and we have disposal for that.
Yeah, and there's so many programs that you can do for free. So as Chris said, our gloves are through TerraCycle, but TerraCycle has a lot of free programs. So say you use a lot of big pens, you can sign up for TerraCycle big pen recycling for free. So if you buy big pens, you're going to collect them into a bag and you can ship them to TerraCycle and they will recycle them for you for free. So Chris touched on a few, and the same with batteries. The one reason why we collect batteries is it's termed as toxic waste here in St. Louis. And it actually is universal toxic waste in the United States. And so that's one of the reasons we collect and recycle them, because they are considered toxic waste materials now.
Okay, Angela. So thanks again for presenting today.
Thank you so much for having me.
There's a question here. Can you give links to agencies which can be used for assistance in greening our museums?
Yes, I can. I definitely can put that in the chat. That is the USGBC, and that will be the Missouri Gateway chapter for our region. And they have actually an upcoming free webinar on how to benchmark your building for free. You will get a one-on-one helper to help benchmark your institution. And one thing that I do want to note is that certain regions in Missouri, that is starting to be a mandate for buildings 50,000 square feet and over. So you definitely may want to talk with your facilities team, because the city of St. Louis now has a mandate for that, and it goes into practice in 2022.
Angela, could you send it to the hosts and panelists? Can you send it to everyone?
Let me send it to everyone. Okay, there, it should be for everyone. And on their website, they do have the free benchmarking webinar as well.
Okay, thank you, Angela.
Thank
Uh,
you.
And Amanda, do you have some
Sure. Well,
concluding remarks?
yeah, just a few things to say. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amanda Langendorfer. I'm the Associate Dean of Libraries for Special Collections and Museums at Truman State University, currently serving as president of MAMA, the Missouri Association of Museums and Archives. And we're so happy everybody could join us today. This has been a really fantastic conference. The sessions have been just spectacular. I did want to give a special thank you to a couple of people who were instrumental in making this possible. First and foremost, we had two sponsors this year, the Missouri Humanities Council, who provides significant funding for this event and is someone we are very grateful for that partnership. And then also the Missouri Historical Society, who arranged for the in-depth workshop that happened yesterday afternoon. So thank you to both of those organizations. I'd also like to thank the MAMA board. This is definitely a team effort to pull off a conference like this. So I wanted to thank them for giving their time and their expertise to making this experience possible, from everything from social media to the Zoom, to running the Zoom and the virtual platform. So a special thank you to Christopher Gordon, who we just saw a moment ago, as well as Linda Endersby, who dedicated a significant amount of time to making sure that this conference went off without a hitch. So thank you for ensuring a very well-planned and enjoyable conference. I'd also like to take a moment to thank all the session presenters. Thank you for taking the time to share your expertise. This conference is a highlight for our membership. It provides a great place to learn about others' projects, new initiatives, things in the museum field that will help us all grow, and really provides a great opportunity. So I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time out of their schedule to present this week. This is one of MAMA's largest educational opportunities throughout the year, and we do offer others as well. So do look for additional opportunities. If you haven't joined MAMA, I would encourage you to do so. Our rates are very reasonable. We do provide a lot of access to professional development. There's usually a type of colleague conversation or workshop at least once a month. Plus, we do a newsletter and promote opportunities through our network. So please do consider joining us. For more information, you can visit our website at missourimuseums.org. So our general theme this year for the conference was Approaching the Horizon, celebrating Missouri's bicentennial. So we wanted to make sure we took a moment to just, celebrate our state, celebrate Missouri's diverse and beautiful heritage that we have and that we've maintained and that we are able to share with others. And so it has been really fantastic to think about how we can look forward to what our museums and archives can achieve in the future. So with that, I'll officially conclude the conference. Thank you all for attending, and I hope to see you again next year.